Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and today we're so delighted to have in studio Dr. Coach Gary Cramer.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Great to see you, Gary. Gary, you are so many different things. Pastor, father, friend, coach at the University of Alabama, on staff as a coach, but you are the spiritual leader, the spiritual guide, the spiritual instructor, the facilitator, as a on-campus director of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FCA, but also you're there on the sidelines. You're there in the locker room. You're there doing Bible studies for the athletics department over all the University of Alabama. And if people don't know, the Crimson Tide cheated out of a national championship last year.
We got beat by a better team at that game.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what led you to all of this? Because you go way back to a doctorate degree from Dallas Theological Seminary, where you did your master's work.
I did.
You pastored in Pennsylvania, then you pastored here in Birmingham. All right. You and I have a prior relationship. I bought the church that you were pastoring at the time, and worked out an arrangement for you to continue to be there until that church remodeled itself and spread its wings and flew out the door.
That's right.
But what got you early on? Because you started out, I think, at Liberty in athletics, NCAA soccer player.
Well, you've done your homework, Rabbi.
Well, I try.
Yeah. Well, a sport that I don't usually bring up down here in the South, because when you bring up that you played soccer somewhere, usually they think you're from the Soviet Union or the Eastern Bloc, or you're a communist of some kind. But we know that it's one of the greatest sports around the world.
It is.
And one of the greatest platforms in sharing Christ. My coach in college played in the Premier League in England. He was from Scotland. And he one day in practice held up a soccer ball and said, "Lads, with this ball you can reach the world." And he was so right. And sport is an international language, as is music.
Right. Music
and sport, two international languages, and we see both of them in the scriptures, which is kind of neat to see that. I was in the pastorate for 15 years, loved every minute of it. Had an incredible opportunity to pastor two great churches.
Right.
And God just started stirring in my soul a passion for coaches and athletes. I was a phys ed major at one time, changed my major to theology when God lit me up over the scriptures. I took an inductive Bible study course and as a kinesiology major, and I just couldn't get enough of the Word. And so that led me to seminary. Didn't go to seminary to become a pastor. I went to the seminary to learn the Word. As a result of seminary, entered the pastorate, loved every bit of it. But about 15 years into the pastorate, God began to stir in us just a real passion for these coaches and these athletes. Began to open up doors for us to the point where I had to go to the elders of our church and say, "Hey guys, look, for me to walk through the doors that are before me, it's really not fair to the church." And so that's when we made that decision. We looked at a number of organizations: Athletes in Action, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, SCORE International, Pro Athletes Out. There's a number of ministries out there, all great ministries. FCA just fit the vision, fit who I was, and so I contacted the local FCA staff here, and after a year of praying together, we came on staff with FCA. I've been at the university since 2005, the University of Alabama, since 2005. First football coach we had that we worked with was Coach Shula. So I was there 2 years with Coach Shula, and then Coach Saban came, and it's been an incredible ride ever since. So I'm the FCA director there, a life coach there. I've since, about 7 years ago, the athletic director and the dean of the Human Environmental Science Department found out I had a doctoral degree, and so they've since put me on faculty. So every freshman athlete's required to take me for a 3-hour course, their first course of their career in life skills and character development. So it's a required course that they have to take at the university. So we are privileged to know every athlete, every scholarship athlete that comes on that campus. And
so let's talk about a contemporary issue.
Yes.
Let's go to the NFL.
Sure.
students that came up under you, okay, from the University of Alabama that have now moved into the National Football League, are they maintaining their faith base? Are they the ones that are standing up for the national anthem? Are they the ones who are being the witnesses in the locker room? Has it stuck? Has it really dug in?
Yeah, I think that two things to understand. One, not every student that takes my class walks away as a follower of Christ, because that is a role that I play, whereas most of the students know my faith base. They know where my compass points north. But the class itself is not an FCA class. FCA is a different entity to those. Now, with that being said, we help those guys, we help those gals that go professionally or whatever they go in. I think the NCAA says most athletes will go to professional in something other than their sport. And so we try to equip them for life. In fact, tomorrow I'll be teaching them financial principles based on God's Word. Now, I don't sit there and quote chapter and verse, but it's all biblically based. I mean, you read the book of Proverbs and order your life according to the book of Proverbs, you're going to be okay in life. I mean, that's just the way it is. Obviously, if you can see the Savior, if you can see the Messiah behind all that and follow Him, is when life really makes sense, like Solomon said in Ecclesiastes. So, with that being said, one is we're trying to equip them to handle those issues when those life issues come up. Those who may be followers or not followers, we really help them understand how to utilize social media, how the camera's always on you, how you need to think long and hard before you send out a tweet or before you join a movement, because we're talking about your brand, your company. Rabbi Eric Walker Incorporated is the way I teach the class, and so everything you do is part of building your brand. And how do you build that brand? How do you preserve that brand? And is this decision you're deciding to be a part of help your brand or work against your brand? So those have been involved with us. I'll be honest with you, Quentin Dial, one of those guys that played for the San Francisco 49ers. He now plays with, they move so fast. I'm trying to think who he's with right now. But for example, when this all thing was going down in San Francisco, Quentin was on the team. Quentin actually walked out onto the field and held the flag, this big giant flag that was spreading out over the whole field. When some of his teammates were making their decision to do what they did, he walked out and held the flag. So, but I can't say that every athlete responds the same way. We're not robots, and they're free. But they will call me. They will check in with me. They'll say, "Coach, what do you think I should do in this instance?" And so we get a chance to still do life with them. Some don't call me. It's just like pastoring a church. It's just mine wears crimson and white now, for the most part. But for even the players that have not made a decision to follow Christ, we've stayed in touch and help them do life even to this point. I show them how you can sign $100 million worth of contracts and go bankrupt. We've had guys do it, and I just show them the numbers and some of the main factors in how that happens. So it's just part of life.
So you're equipping them to move into whether or not it's broadcast, coaching, whatever aspect of their life, marriage, family, being a role model, being a good citizen. So the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, top line is to promote the gospel.
Absolutely. I mean, we want to impact our world for Jesus Christ with the influences of coaches and athletes, the influence of coaches and athletes. So, yeah, primarily that's our goal.
Now, do you find much resistance on the team or on campus? We've got a lot of, we've had Dr. Everett Piper on with us, and he wrote a book called "We Are Not a Daycare." We don't really care whether or not your feelings, we're not giving you a degree in feelings. We're giving you a degree in a particular area of study. Now, if you don't like it, you may choose any other university you so desire to go to that fits in your model of what you like and don't like, but we're not going to be concerned whether or not we have a class or a speaker that offends you. Okay? That's feelings. Offense is a feeling. So if you choose to take offense, which is active on your part, that light can't offend me. I can take offense at the light, but the light's existence doesn't offend me. It's a choice. So he's taken this position from a university perspective that we're not a daycare, and this is Oklahoma Wesleyan. And he says, you came here knowing what our curriculum was, knowing what our faith is, knowing what our curriculum is. Why are you protesting against it when you made the choice to come here?
Sure.
So you tell people who you are. They know you as
Absolutely.
Coach Cramer. They know you as the director of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes on the University of Alabama campus for the athletics department, so the baseball team, the soccer team.
So I have young athletes that are Muslim. I have young athletes that are Jewish. I have young athletes that are nominal Christians, and I have those who come to drink every day and want to drink deeply at the well. In fact, Coach Saban asked me early on, he says, how do you respond? How will you respond to all of those athletes? And I said, I will love them just like Jesus would. Nowhere do I force feed. Nowhere do I apologize for who I am. We talk a lot about intellectual honesty and the fact that as, I tell them, I said, my greatest hope would be that as you are here, that you not only have the opportunity to develop a relationship with those who are your peers horizontally, because you're going to meet some of the most special people you'll ever meet in your life at this place over the next 4 years. You may be sitting in class next to the next governor. They do come from the University of Alabama every once in a while. And I say you may be sitting next to that student in class, so don't just build your life around another athlete or being with the athlete. Get outside of the Malmore athletic complex. Go see a play. Go see a musical, a recital. Take your gal out where you have to dress up one night to go do it and expand and broaden your horizons. That's why you came here. But at the same time, while I'm encouraging you to pursue that horizontal relationship, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you sometime during that 4 years to consider the vertical relationship. And I do it in terms of everyone has a worldview, Eric. Everyone holds to a worldview. Whatever that worldview may be, you will eventually die for that worldview. And so I encourage them to investigate their worldview, to test their worldview, and at some point, if they ever should want to consider the Christian worldview, that I am here, and if they want to find out what I'm really passionate about, that's what I love to explore with them. So out of that class, we've had a number of Bible studies start. We started one study. The only way you could be in it was to believe that God did not exist. And so it was all international, all former Eastern Bloc students that came over to the university to be a part of athletics. All very, very, very highly regarded in their countries, on their national teams, that kind of thing. And then we just simply started a study on origin, how all that is came into being. And we didn't even use the Bible for a semester because we weren't there yet. The Bible carried no credence. There was no reason.
Right.
And so we just explored the options that we had without thinking that there was a supreme being, a self-existent being, outside of this universe who might have had something to do with creation. And so first semester, our point that we got to at the end of the semester is, could that be an option? Not is that the right answer, but could that, after we've checked off all of these other options that all of these theories and philosophies are throwing at us, and we've looked at the reasonableness of that, and we've looked at the fact that it takes more faith to believe those answers to the world's origin than it would this. They finally got to the point where they said, okay, this is an option. Now that was a huge,
Sure.
that inch, if you will, was a huge inch that we covered. But then we started the next semester looking at Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And what I asked them, I said, are you okay? Well, we could explore other worldviews where there is a supreme being. But the one I know the most about is the Christian worldview. Would you guys mind if we explored that first? And let's see if it doesn't give us adequate answers to the questions we're asking about origin. And so that's what we did. And,
now, these are all elective.
this is outside. This is on their own time. This is now in the context of a relationship that we've built, student-professor, if you will, in the context of a class. Like you said, I want to grow them for life. I want to teach. One of the things they're coming to a university for, especially a liberal arts university, is not for us to spoon feed them information, but to teach them how to think critically. And so part of thinking critically is thinking through your worldview. thinking through how you do life. What is it that you order your life around? And so while I don't shove my worldview down their throats,
Right.
I challenge them, because I've found that the best way in sharing my worldview and getting the opportunity to share mine is to begin to surface questions in your own thinking about yours. And if I can surface your questions, and if I can get you to ask the right questions, the problem is most students aren't asking the right questions. In fact, most people don't ask the right questions. I always ask them, why do you believe that? And we had one of our athletes the other day. He was sharing his faith with a young girl. He's a freshman. And it just really highlighted the need for him to plug in and grow. But he was sharing his faith with another young athlete, a female. And she just said, why are you a Christian? He couldn't answer. So now we've created a hunger. So now, even though he's he just believed it, never knew why he believed it, or why he thought, wow. And so now he's hungry. There's a need to know. And so I've plugged him in with some of our upperclassmen who I've poured my life into, because my philosophy is build leaders, and then let the leaders build leaders. So some of my upperclassmen who are on his team are now having a study. It's about 8 guys together in a study, and they're studying the whys of Christianity. And he's like wanting to be there because there's a need. You know, we've raised the right questions. And here's what I'm finding with these students. You know, everybody talks about the millennials. They do not want Jesus light.
No, they don't want anything.
They want something of substance. And this is my observation. They're not wanting just to go and even get the music. They're not wanting to go to just play church. They want substance. They want to know this person. And so they want to be able to defend their faith in the midst of swirling winds. Why do I believe this? And then they want to be able to share that. So every day I go to work, I can't wait to get out of bed. It's an exciting day. You never know what's going to happen. Last night, it's a job. It's the job. You're always on the clock. I got a text at 2:30. Right. We have a kid from Las Vegas. He's texting me at 2:30 about the crises and this terrible situation in Vegas. And but you answer that text at 2:30. That's just what you do in this world. So
well, that's exactly right. You make an interesting point. 1 Peter 3:15. Have a ready answer. People don't find that to be a command. They think it's a suggestion. Yeah. And because we've gotten so far away from our understanding of laws, legalism, commands of God, we say, well, we're saved by grace, we're under grace, we're not under the law. But the New Testament has like 1,050 commands.
Absolutely. Obedience is a key to the fruitful walk with Jesus. And we've taught our memory verse today. We have a study right after this that I'll be in at 12:30. A little later today, and our memory verse is, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is a reasonable service of worship. That's not a suggestion.
No.
Paul is urging, beseeching, begging them to do what God has commanded them to do. He wants all of us. And so that's our verse for today. In fact, that's our subline, obedience to Christ.
And see, that reinforces the fact that the sacrificial system has become personal. The sacrificial system isn't about an altar at a temple. It's about your body and yourself and your character. And we have that indication when Abraham says to his servants, listen, you wait here. My son and I are going over there to worship. Well, no, you're not. You're going over there to sacrifice. So worship is sacrifice, and sacrifice is worship. We're introduced to that. Now it's made personal. In your memory verse for today, and it's so stunning.
Worship costs you something.
Yes. If worship doesn't change you, you have not worshiped. And when people finally understand that, it's not entertainment, it's an encounter.
That's right.
It's transformation. It's moving from God's system. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, enter his courts with praise, enter the Holy of Holies, bow down low in worship.
That's right.
And that's where you're changed. You're not changed by clapping your hands. You're changed when you come into the presence of God. And you have to prepare the atmosphere. Right. And so that's this system we have, this almost formula where praise and worship have been condensed to one word. It's supposed to usher you in, but it works you up, and then It's almost in some cases anticlimactic when the message comes, because it doesn't take you where you want. I'm ready to go in, and wait a minute.
Yeah.
You want to talk to me about what?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with where I'm waiting to hear from the Lord, and you're telling me a story about the country club. It's not transformational.
Yeah.
And I've heard you preach, and you don't preach like that.
Yeah.
You preach transformational. I
Yeah.
preach transformational. It's not my message.
It's his story.
It's his.
Yeah.
Do you find any on college campuses today? We find that there is a liberal group, a new mindset that is moving this modern liberal thought that drives everything to the individual. That's the me, myself, and I identity, and it's identity politics, and identity morality, and identity character, and I can be anything, I can do anything. And listen, what's so interesting about what you and I came up in, my parents never told me I could be anything I wanted, because I was only, at the time, I was a little bitty 95-pound.
Well, working with athletes, I think probably, Eric, we have a little advantage there because they know they can't. Like, they know they have their limits.
Mm-hmm.
They know that they're not starting for a reason, or they know they're not playing offensive line for a reason, or they know they're not the quarterback for, that in athletics, I think the cruel reality is that it's a great laboratory to grow people up. And if you don't do your job, you're out. There's no, especially in our program, we're not doing young people any service to flatter them, patronize them. I don't know. The one thing I love about working with our program is there's never a time, I don't think, when I have seen honesty with a player. It may hurt. It may hurt for us to tell a player something. But in the end, it's the best thing. It's the best thing. We've had to tell young men they couldn't play. We had to tell men that they can't put the uniform back on because maybe they've had one too many concussions. That's hard because they still think they can. And the part that's hard for us is in many cases, in a lot of cases with these young people, they are coming from a cultural genre where they are the ticket for their family out of a tough situation. And so the pressure on 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, for them to get hurt, or for them to not succeed, or for them to not start and not get a shot at the NFL. Now, we probably do better than most schools, and I've got the hard numbers, but out of 21 freshmen that come in, or 25 freshmen that come in, 7 might get a shot at the NFL. Okay? So 7. And a shot means you might get invited to a training camp. Not make the team. It just means you might get invited. So that's part of preparing them for life too. And when they're coming in a freshman, I was a freshman. I didn't want to hear that either. I thought I was going to be a pro soccer player. That's what I wanted to do. And I got to my first practice, and I'm surrounded by 3 guys that played for the Ghana national team and 2 guys that played for the Nigerian national team, and they all played my position. And coach asked in the first team meeting, hey, has anybody here played defense? And I was a striker, but they were too. And as soon as I saw these guys touch the ball, I said, hey, I played defense in middle school. I can play defense. Because I wanted to get in the game.
Right.
But I knew the reality was I wasn't as good as these guys. I became the captain probably because I could speak English better than any of the rest of my teammates. But the point being is athletics is a great equalizer, and it's a great reality check. So I probably don't deal with that as much as maybe if I were just dealing with students in general. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
Because of the culture that we have in athletics.
We look at the makeup of the NFL. It's 70% African American, 12% white, and then there's a category of 18% other, from Samoan to Russian to all over the world.
Australian kickers.
Yeah, Latino, all kinds of different backgrounds. But this really is like the NBA. college football, college basketball, for the big schools with the intense basketball programs. I grew up in Pittsburgh. Duquesne was a great basketball program in its day. Penn State football team, Coach Paterno, this whole horrible, wretched situation that has come about. Fortunately, there's hopefully it'll be on this side of recovery from horrible, but it lets us know that without a foundation of faith, without guidelines, without accountability, without all these things, that even the most prestigious institutions can be riddled with this new FBI investigation into graft corruption of basketball on the college campus. That nobody's immune. That become a believer in Jesus does not give you an inoculation against temptation, against even circumstantial crimes. You're in the place and you don't say anything. You see something and you're there and you don't report it. All of a sudden you're guilty. This is that understanding of sin of omission. That, but I didn't do anything. Exactly. And you're called to a higher standard. My insurance agent, Tyler Watts, 4 years quarterbacking, and he's a nationwide insurance guy. Has his own agency,
Doing very well.
Doing very well. Good friend of mine.
Yep.
And, sure, he had his eyes set on everything, but he had an arm for radio and
face for radio, too. No,
exactly.
We love Tyler.
Mine. Yeah, Tyler's great, and I talk to him all the time. Yeah. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how the Fellowship of Christian Athletes is expanding, how you get involved, why you get involved. Is this the best program for athletes to learn about more than faith? How to be a good citizen of this world, even if you don't accept Jesus. The messaging, the core messaging of raising the level of the water so all of the boats come up. Right. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Dr. Gary Coach Cramer from the University of Alabama and Director of Campus Fellowship of Christian Athletes at the University of Alabama. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, Prophecy in the News videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and today we're visiting in studio with Dr. Gary Coach Cramer, University of Alabama Director of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and coach at the University of Alabama as the spiritual life coach of all of the University of Alabama athletics. Gary, welcome back to the program, my friend.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good to be here.
Good to have you here. So the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, okay, international organization, because now they've spread their wings and have expanded globally. But they have an event coming up on October the 11th called the Fields of Faith. And this is going to be campuses all over the United States, and you're participating in this there at the University of Alabama, and I believe there's 5 locations within Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, there's actually a number of locations. Central Alabama, Alabama, we have 42 staff across the state of Alabama.
Wow.
So there'll be a number of Fields of Faith. There's over 500 already registered across the country. Last year, they reached almost 200,000 young people that packed out the stadiums. 7,500 of those students made first-time professions of faith.
Wow.
In those events. So it's a wonderful event. It's led by the students. That's one of the things, one of the real focus of FCA is to establish student leaders and to grow student leaders. So it's not about us going onto a campus. It's about us equipping those who are already in their sphere of influence. And so the student athletes are the ones who plan these. The student athletes are the ones who speak at these. They host these. We did one at Hoover that I was involved in a few years ago, and the students shared their testimonies. They had a band. They had prayer time, all led by the students. Of course, you need some adult supervision,
right.
And that's where an FCA huddle coach, we call them huddle coaches, comes in. They're certified through FCA. They fill out about takes about 20 minutes to fill out an application to be involved in FCA. Lets us hear their story of faith. We do a background check. Of course, most educators already have that background check, but we do another one just to make sure they're who they say they are. And so that's how they get involved. But they're more of an advisor than the person who is leading it. They're there to pull it together to make sure the students are preparing. But student-led. and which is a real strength, I think, of our organization. It's one of the things that sold me on FCA as to how we do it. FCA, more than any other sports organization, is probably one of the premier in the high schools, junior highs, and elementary school levels. We're kind of breaking into the elementary levels because, my gosh, the youth sports movement. I was watching HBO the other night with Brian Gumbel. He said youth sports is an $8 billion industry. It's crazy. It's out of control. And so, here's a sphere of influence that is part of athletics that to ignore the fact that there are families on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that aren't coming to church, aren't coming to worship, but they're out there. Well, are we just going to let them? We got to meet them where they are, and so God is really.
That's one of the biggest complaints that I hear from moms who say that we have church events on. Still some on Wednesday night, but yet they schedule a game or they schedule a practice. And so this tuning in to the faith component of life has changed over the last 25 or 30 years.
Very much.
And the scheduling is done from a very secular perspective. The games are scheduled from a very secular perspective. We just came out of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. We remember Sandy Koufax not pitching in the World Series because he was observant. We know that there was a college athlete that said, no, I'm not going to play.
That's right.
Because this
Didn't play until after sun had set.
Until the sun had set. So he would come into the game after sunset, but he was going to observe his tradition. And that should be embraced with respect. Now, we have athletes coming from countries, Muslim, growing up in the Muslim community, and I'm sure that there are certain challenges, but I don't find them as much in athletics because people tend to like you as relate to you as an athlete and a team member, and are more inclusive in that way.
We respect each other's differences because we have a common denominator that brings us together as a team. Now, at Alabama, we're blessed. It's been really. We emphasize that a lot too. Mm-hmm. We focus on that. But I've seen divisiveness. I mean, faith can cause division too. I've seen overzealous followers of Christ,
of course,
cause division. And my mantra is, if folks are in opposition to me, I want them to be opposed to the gospel, not to the way I'm sharing it, because the gospel is rather offensive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right? And so if they're going to be offended, I want it to be with the message, the truth, not with the messenger. And so that doesn't mean I compromise. That doesn't mean, but it means that I do it in a way that I'm not going to argue. I mean, the Apostle Paul addresses that. Don't get caught up in these scandals and these little arguments. And now, in the life of the church, I think Paul told Titus, tell the guy to stop it.
Right.
Stop it. And if you warn him twice and he doesn't stop it, well, dismiss him. And so divisiveness in the context of the church is handled differently than divisiveness, say, on a team. We've got to be careful. We're in the world, but we're not to be of the world. And so that's part of maturity. That's helping guys know how to live out their faith. It's part of growth. And yet, there comes a time, even though we should live our lives in such a way that people see Christ in us, for them to know Christ, there has to be a proclamation of truth. There has to be that opportunity to share that truth with them. And, sometimes that truth offends, but it doesn't demolish the relationship. I always make it a point to say, as I'm sharing my faith, if you don't follow, if you don't believe this like I do, we're still friends. But I got to share it with you because it changed my life. And even I've got guys that, at least I've had guys look at me and I say, what's keeping you from following Christ right now? And their response is, I just don't want to get out of the driver's seat, Coach. And I'm sitting there going, you know what? You get it. I'm good with that. I'm good with the fact that you can look truth in the eye, say it makes sense, but I don't want that right now. The will is much stronger than the intellect, isn't it, Eric?
Oh, I mean, no question.
We can, and that's what those who saw Jesus, they could not argue with who he was.
Right.
They just didn't want to follow him. In John chapter 6, when Jesus had just fed 5,000, he's just walked across the water to get to the other side, and these folks come in and say, hey, what do we need to do for this eternal life thing? He says, eat from me. Mm-hmm. Submit to me, and you've got the answer. And it said in the scriptures that the crowd walked away. And then Jesus turned to his closest followers and said, do you guys want to go with him? And that's when I love Peter's response. It's the classic Peter, as honest gets. Basically, it's where else would we go? I mean, you're the answer.
Right.
I may, if I could find another way of getting this that you offer, instead of submitting my will to you, I'd probably do it, but there is no other way. And so the will's just a much strong. So when I share the truth, I understand that I'll never argue anyone into the kingdom. Even though the Christian worldview, I call it the most reasonable faith. Mm-hmm. Every other faith takes a leap.
Oh, no question.
Mine, it's built on a reasoned faith, mm-hmm. and it makes sense.
It does.
But the will doesn't cross that. That's
so
the Holy Spirit's work.
Your relationship with Coach Saban, the other coaching staff,
yes.
Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, all the folks on the sidelines, and you're on the sidelines during the game.
Yep, in a dugout during baseball on the sidelines. We're very careful that I know my role. My job is not football. They don't want me to coach football. I don't call plays in football. In fact, I don't see a game on the sidelines. I'm the short, little, fat guy, white guy down there that's not hard to find, but doesn't see the game because, number one, the guys are too big in front of me. Right. If a play's going on, I look up at the Jumbotron. But my job is to look for that guy who's having a tough day, that guy who maybe just made a bonehead play, that guy who's not playing, that's kind of disinterested, and to help them engage, to help them see that there's something bigger here. My job is to keep them in the wagon during a game, and so it's a great privilege, to just engage them in that way. You talk about the life of a coach. I mean, these guys, the business is such that it's like a snowball going downhill. If those guys you got to keep up with them. And what folks don't understand most of the time is how coaching affects a man's family, how it affects Sundays. Sundays is a tough day for a coach. I mean, you think about it. Last weekend, we had an 8:00 p.m. game.
Right.
I got to bed at 1:30. Now, I have the fortitude to get up early, and so I'm up getting ready for worship and engaging with my church. These guys are getting up and probably already watching film for the next opponent. So through the week, I'm sending them each day a little devo that's pointed toward them, asking them the hard questions, realizing that some of the only word they're going to get are the nuggets that I send them, or the time that we have a Bible study at 6:30 on Thursday mornings. It's early, but it's the only time because we start meetings so early. They got to get up and get there, and they do. But it helps that I have some Chick-fil-A biscuits there. Everybody loves Chick-fil-A, so Chick-fil-A has been a great partner with us through the years. But you've got to meet folks where they are. It goes back to what we were talking about with youth sports. We're not going to change the culture.
Right.
May not like it. How am I going to meet them where they are? How am I going to feed them? Am I just going to starve? And that's where FCA has stepped in and said, okay, how can we help meet this need that's not going to change? And we don't want to become a substitute for the local church. We know that's not who FCA is. We are alongside the church. We are an arm of the church. We don't want to replace it. There's no way. It's such a beautiful entity, and the bride of Christ is what it is. We're just a tool that the church can use to help that happen.
There's a number of ways to contact the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. There's www.fca.org is the Fellowship of Christian Athletes website. The Alabama website is alabamafca.org. They have a Facebook page for FCA. They've got a Twitter feed for FCA. And this event, the 14th Annual Field of Faith event on October 11th, if you want to follow this or really get in touch with somebody to have it, you can get involved at www.fieldsoffaith.com. More than 500 locations nationwide. The purpose is to encourage young people to engage the Bible, commit their lives to Christ. The event consists of worship and prayer on athletic fields. 2016, 192,000 in attendance. 7,414 of them made first-time faith commitments. 8,612 recommitted their lives to Christ. 8,781 committed to reading their Bible, which is what seals the deal. That's the glue that holds the faith together, is a solid Bible plan, Bible reading plan. And so if you want to sponsor one, and our audience is all over the world, we've got over 450,000 followers on social media. We are rebroadcast on WND TV, so we're reaching an audience, and it's now an international organization. You mentioned you're going to Germany.
I am. To coach American football.
To coach American football in Germany.
I'll be joined by another former Alabama player that will be coming to us. You'll be interested in this. He'll be coming from Israel, where he's coaching American football in Israel, and he'll be joining us in Stuttgart to help me there. So we partner with other organizations all around the world. Wherever folks are at, if there is an opportunity for us to help or come alongside of them, or an organization that's already grassroots on the ground where we can help come alongside of them and work with them, that's what we're all about. So, you know, we do, this past year I took teams to Costa Rica, Panama, and then coming up this summer we'll be going to Germany. A number of our best players went with me, life-changing. It's something about walking into a Nicaraguan refugee camp and meeting believers and bringing them food, and they're looking for you. When you bring them a grocery bag that feeds them for a month, and you pray over them. And before we went into the Nicaraguan village, the students were saying, Coach, if you ask me to pray, what do I pray? Mm-hmm. And I said, you pray not that God takes them out of here, but that God uses them in their sphere. Because who else will reach the rest of this community that lives in these shacks?
See, there you have it. We started out the conversation saying people ask the wrong questions. And here's the question they ask. Lord, how do I get out of this problem? How do I get out of this situation? The question should be, what do you want me to get out of this situation?
That's right.
Not how to get out of it. Well, how do you want to use me in this circumstance? You have me here. You're sovereign. You've placed me in this trial, in whatever it is, and we tend to blame Satan for everything. Listen, he's not omnipresent. He's not omnipotent. He's
no match
not omniscient.
For the Savior.
He is a creation the same way we are, just created a little higher than us and just a little bit more committed to his sin than we are as the body of faith. And so, listen, and that's not to say we're not committed to our sin, because believers are still committed to their sin. They still repeat the same kind of thing. Even Paul says, he says, I do what I ought not to do, and what I should do, I don't.
That's right.
And so we're in great company, not that that should justify our action, but to let us know we all walk out our salvation with fear and trembling. Coach, we've got about 7 minutes left in this segment. I want to make sure that we are talking about faith issues. For so many, as you mentioned, this is the ticket out of the ghetto. This is the ticket out of the inner city. And that's not just in America. We look at Brazil. We look at Venezuela. We look at Argentina. International soccer is the way out of gangs, drugs, oppression, poverty, to develop these skill sets and to dream big. And there's an influence in there. A lot of times it's the local pastor. A lot of times it's the one trying to keep them hemmed in from getting into the gangs, hemmed in to keep them from getting into drugs, hemmed in to keep them and ministering the word. And they are the unsung heroes. They are the ones, you know, mom and God get all the credit on the football field.
Mom gets the house.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, mom gets the house. That's the first thing I can do is buy
Right,
mom a house.
right. I'm gonna buy mom a house. Right, mom and God. You know, okay. And hey, you had a great play in that second half. And what do you do? Well, I want to thank my mother, and I want to thank my Lord and Savior.
Yep.
Right. And mom and God get all the credit, and you're right. She gets the house. And that's you know, we look at it, and it's what we see. But many of these players would not have gone to college.
That's right.
Had it not been for their athletic ability. And we forget that these are college students that are required to maintain. What kind of average must they maintain to be on the University of Alabama football team?
Well, it depends on what year you're in. But you have to make at least C's to stay on the field.
So you have to 2.0 or better.
Or better.
Right, to stay on the team.
Yep.
And listen, you know, what do you call a man that graduated last in his medical school class?
Doctor.
You call him doctor.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody looks at your GPA.
Well, let me say this, Eric, about this. Because at the University of Alabama, I don't care if you're playing offense or defense. You know, most people say, oh, you put a football player on defense because all you got to do is time to find the ball. Find the football. You cannot play for us and be not intellectually sharp. Our defense is so complicated. I mean, I'm just saying, these kids are sharp. They're very, very smart, and so we know that, and so we don't give them any excuses in the classroom. If you can play for us, this class stuff is nothing to work through.
Yeah,
we know you can do
your
this.
playbook is complex.
It's crazy. It's this thick. If you can do that, we know you can do this. And so we are seeing, I'll tell you what I'm seeing lately. I'm seeing more and more athletes that are coming in and they're not taking just the major that gets them through, because I think our message is resonating with them. They're taking majors like pre-med, engineering. Now, engineering is a tough major to stay with and to be an athlete. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing more and more of those athletes, because here's the deal. Athletics on a college campus has them at the campus year-round now. A lot of our athletes are finishing in 3 years. And by the time they leave with a 4-year degree, they have that plus a graduate degree, which is, we've put that before them. We said, when you come here, you could actually leave here getting a graduate degree paid for. Why not? Get your MBA. We have a number of guys getting their MBA. If you watch a football game and you see there's an SEC, Southeastern Conference patch here,
right,
we now recognize the guys who have already gotten their degree with an SEC patch graduate on their uniforms. Most of them are in their graduate program working on another degree. They've already got one. And so we recognize that's important to us, and we put the symbol on the uniform to let them know how important that is. And I think the SEC across the board, the Southeastern Conference, is doing that for all of our athletes. It's a big deal.
So you don't have to be an undergrad?
You don't have to be an undergrad. You could have finished your undergrad degree and be working on your graduate degree.
And still play.
Yeah, we've got a number of young men right now, 7 or 8, already have the degrees, working on their MBAs or working on a graduate degree of some kind, that are playing for us right now.
See, that breaks a lot of the preconceived notions. Now, have you correlated, and I don't want to make this like people of faith do better than people of non-faith, but have you correlated those who have made a profession of faith in their success or in their advancement or where they go to, not necessarily into athletics, but vocations, and how they've carried that forward? Is there a follow-on? You have a fellowship of Christian athletes, but that's a 4 to 6 year window. Then they go off, and what happens to them after that?
Yeah, I think the proof is in, I always tell them, I'll know I've done a good job with you guys when I see you 10 and 15 years down the road, when you're still in love with your wife, you're raising your children to know Jesus, and we get those calls. I just did a wedding here recently. Jimmy Nelson pitches for the Milwaukee Brewers. He pitched for us way back, 8-10 years ago. He calls me up and said, Coach, I found the gal that God brought in my life. I've been waiting for her. We want you to do the wedding, and we want it to be focused on Christ. So here we are. That's when you know. As far as success on the athletic field, I don't know that I have stats on that, because you know what? And you'll understand what I'm saying here. I don't preach a prosperity.
Right, of course not.
I preach, you know what? God may not give you success, but prosperity is knowing Him. Mm-hmm. It's not about
Yeah, I was thinking more not of prosperity, but more of stable, incorruptible, following their faith, staying plugged in,
Yes.
having a faith-based family, and becoming good citizens of the world.
Yeah.
As
No, there's no doubt that we see that, but they've made decisions, kind of like Daniel did in the book of Daniel. You know, he made those decisions before he was put in that situation.
Yes.
When the king's buffet and chocolate-covered strawberries were put in front of him, he'd already made that decision as to what he was going to do in that situation. And I think we see a lot of that with our young men and women.
we've been talking with Dr. Gary Coach Cramer, University of Alabama, Director of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and coach in the athletics department for spiritual and life coaching. Extraordinary career as a pastor, as a minister of the gospel, and impacting so many lives. I have firsthand knowledge of some of the lives he's impacted. This is an incredible organization, and we've talked to you about First Priority. We've talked to you about other ministries. This is a ministry on the campus that is geared toward the athlete. Those are the ones who have this coaching influence, that discipline becomes an important part of their character and how they can succeed in athletics, or use athletics as a means to get scholarships, better education opportunities. And Gary is a part of this organization. They have a Field of Faith event on October 11th all over the nation. If you want to get involved, fieldsoffaith.com. If there's nothing going on in your local university town, I suggest you get in touch with them. You can follow them on Facebook and on Twitter, fca.org. Gary Cramer, thank you so much for being with us here.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it so much.
Good to see you, my friend. God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.